Hey, what's going on, guys? If you only watch me for my Apex content, this might not be the video for you, but as you've probably guessed from the title, this video is going to be about Percy Jackson, or more specifically, the Disney live-action adaptation and its terrible casting. I want to start off by saying that this is by no means a video criticizing the actors casted in the show. In fact, I actually feel terrible for them for getting any negative backlash at all. This video is going to be about the ridiculous casting decisions made by Disney and by the author of the novels himself, Rick Riordan. To set this up, I need to tell you guys about how much this book means to me. I read the entire first 5-book series, Percy Jackson and the Olympians, in middle school in 8th grade, and I didn't actually find out about the Heroes of Olympus all the way until high school. Since then, I've probably reread or listened to the audiobooks while I'm working, maybe 10 or 15 times, and I'm trying to be generous with that estimate. The Son of Neptune alone I've probably read over 20 times. My cat's name is literally Percy Jackson on his GPS chip in his neck. If he got lost and somebody took him to the vet and pulled it up, it would literally say his name is Percy Jackson. That is my cat's name. So when I heard that Percy Jackson was getting a live adaptation reboot, and that Rick Riordan, who had complained about how hands-off he was during the movie series, had actually played a larger role in the casting decisions and was going to be working alongside the director through every step of the process, I was extremely excited, and I thought that was an amazing sign. I think most people thought that that was a very good tell of what's to come, you know? And then the cast started to come out. First, Walker Scobell was announced as Percy Jackson, and, you know, at first, I think this threw everybody off a little bit. You know, I've never seen Stranger Things, so I had no idea who this kid was. But what threw me off was his hair. Because if you don't know, Percy Jackson, from the books, is supposed to have black moppy hair, like a skater kid. He's been described as like he's supposed to look like a ruffian skater looking kid. And, you know, obviously that's not what the new Percy looks like. And I still, even after reading Rick Riordan's initial statements about Percy Jackson's casting decision and that he's the perfect guy or this or that, I've read these books for over 15 years, and I have a clear image in my mind of who these characters are, and you can't just rewrite a decade's worth of image association in a person's mind. That's not how it works. So when I think of Percy Jackson, I associate it with an image in my head of who this character is, and that's how every single character is. I mean, even like extremely minor characters like Linus, the goat man who ended up dying in the 5th book from the first series, the goat that always gave Rover a super hard time. I picture him in my mind. Like, I have a very clear image of a pot-bellied goat with old gray hair and a big old beard and goatee, and you cannot remove that association because I've read these books so many times in the last 10 to 15 years. And I don't care about any of the comments saying, oh, you're racist, this or that. There's just like, that's just copium. Rick Riordan is a fantastic author. I am a huge fan of his books, and I always will be a huge fan of his books. I read every single thing that he's made, or every single thing that I can get my hands on. I read, the first Percy Jackson series, 5-book series. Then I read the Heroes of Olympus. I read the Apollo series, where it takes place from Apollo's perspective after he turns into a human after the events of the Heroes of Olympus. I even read the Kane Chronicles, which I'm not like super into Egyptian mythology, but I found those books pretty entertaining, and I even found a short story crossover between Percy Jackson and the Kane Chronicles series. So, you know, I've read as much literature of this guy as I can get my hands on, and I love his books. I love his storytelling. I think he's creative and hilarious. I think the Heroes of Olympus series, when he's speaking from Leo's perspective, is like some of the funniest things that I've ever read. Like the way that his brain thinks, it's hilarious, and I love reading it, and I'll go back and reread it all the time, and I still plan on doing it soon. You know, I do it every now and every couple of years. I go back and listen to the audiobooks or pull out the books out of my, I have a box of books in my closet that I pull it out of. But one way or the other, I'm a huge fan of this story, and I don't think that you can just write off a fan's opinion by saying, oh, well, you're racist or you have prejudice. I think that that discounts the loyalty and the perspective of your actual fans that have read your books over the last decade, and I think that it's an insult and a slap to the face to everybody that's read his book series over the last 10 years. And I think that there's very specific descriptions of these characters. I don't even have to know, like, I'm going to pull up pictures after for editing purposes, but I don't have to know what Zeus looks like. Okay, I know what Zeus looks like. He has black hair, unlike his brother who has more shades of gray. He's supposed to be wearing, I believe if I remember correctly, he's supposed to be wearing like formal attire, kind of like a mobster maybe, formal dress code basically. Like, he has like gold rings and shit, long black curled back hair like Talia. He's supposed to have dark black hair just like Talia, his daughter, and he looks exactly like his brother. They have similar facial features. It's just Poseidon looks a little bit older and more rustic, and his eyes are suntanned and he has crow's feet on his eyes. See, I know all this without even looking at the descriptions online. I can tell you all of it. I can tell you that each and every individual character has something intrinsic to their appearance, even if it's not something super major. Like, for example, Annabeth. I haven't heard a single person bring up this argument, but it is stated in the books that part of the reason why she's self-conscious about her looks is because of her blonde hair, because most people see her as a dumb blonde girl and she has to work twice as hard to get any recognition. And that's a stereotype. Blondes being dumb. It's a real stereotype and it's a real thing, and I think that it added a lot of real depth to her character that made her much more believable as a character within the story. And while you could very easily say that the same stereotypes apply to African Americans and that Leah Jeffries would very easily fill the same quote-unquote requirements or whatever you want to say, like, number one, I think that saying something along those lines is actually just as racist as Rick Riordan is claiming his fans are. But number two, I don't think that it really matters whether or not it fits or not. I think that at this point, the fans have been sitting with these stories for over a decade. And at this point, we already have a clear mental image of these characters. You can't erase the image out of our mind. It's not going to work. That's the entire point, and that's the reason for the backlash. And for all the shit that people give the movies, at the end of the day, the first movie came out and Annabeth had brown hair, but at the very least, they at least tried to rectify it in the second movie, and they gave her blonde hair. They at least had the courtesy to realize that they fucked up with the casting, and they should try and make her a little bit more lore accurate to the story. They had the dignity to do it, And I also think that Lance Reddick as Zeus makes no fucking sense whatsoever. I've seen tons of movies with Lance Reddick in it, and never once have I ever pictured him as being the really grumpy, really mean and stern and forceful Zeus that we read about in the books that's super obstinate even to his own son Jason after meeting him. Like Roman and Greek, he's this obstinate son of a bitch, and nobody would ever have imagined Lance Reddick, of all people, being Zeus. It just makes no fucking sense whatsoever, and it's so disappointing. And I think that the worst part of all of this truly is the fact that Rick Riordan is completely ignorant and obstinate in not listening to his core fan base that has legitimate gripes about the casting, in my opinion. And let me give you a quote directly from Rick Riordan right here. This is a quote directly from his website, and I quote, "You are upset, disappointed, frustrated, and angry because a black actor has been cast to play a character who is described as white in the books. You refuse to believe me, the guy who wrote the books and created these characters, when I say that these actors are perfect for the roles because of the talent they bring and the way they used their auditions to expand, improve, and electrify their auditions. You are judging her appropriateness for this role solely and exclusively based on how she looks. She is a black girl playing someone who is described in the books as white. Friends, that is racism." End quote. Now, let's just take a moment to address how ridiculous this entire statement is as a whole. Nobody is trying to dismiss her hard work. Nobody's saying that she isn't a great actress. What we're saying is that this role shouldn't have been casted this way. There's tons of talented actors that get passed up for certain roles all the time. If you've ever seen the audition tapes for The Office, you would be surprised at all the heavy hitters that literally got turned away from The Office of all TV shows. The Office was throwing away names like Will Ferrell and things like that. They didn't want them. They wanted lesser known actors for a reason, because that's what the show desired. That's what the role called for. They couldn't have any big names because it would have thrown everything off. Steve Carell was the biggest name on the entire show, and that was by design. When you cast shows, you have to keep in mind the roles that you're casting for. That's the entire point of having a casting director. That's the entire point. To disregard that and just say, oh, well, they're perfect because I think so, is just ridiculous. And I think another important quote from a little bit earlier in this statement that Rick Riordan made, which is, I think, more telling of the reason why he decided to cast these individuals for these roles to begin with, is right here. And I quote, "I was quite clear a year ago when we announced our first open casting that we would be following Disney's company policy of non-discrimination. We are committed to diverse, inclusive casting for every role. Please submit qualified performers without regard to disability, gender, race, and ethnicity, age, color, national origin, sexual orientation, gender identity, or any other basis prohibited by law. We did that. The casting process was long, intense, massive, and exhaustive." End quote. Now, if there's any reason to bring up you following Disney company policy of non-discrimination, it would be to try and justify some whack job casting practices. For all intents and purposes, if any of these teenage actors receive any backlash, I think that the author himself, Rick Riordan, should feel the most responsibility. I think when you read those things, you should feel responsible for the idiotic, racist things that people have typed out or said to her. I don't think that it's a good thing that's happened. I think it's a horrible thing that's happened, and I don't take any responsibility for any of it, because I'm not the person who decided to cast a girl for a role that she should never have been casted to begin with. It's plain ignorant, and you know, if you're a great author, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're a great casting director. So let's just put that out there. But I just wanted to talk about this because this book series means a lot to me. It always has, and it's an important part of my life, I feel like, and it was just such an insane disappointment when I was receiving these, little bits and pieces of information in regards to the casting and all the backlash, especially the way that Rick Riordan responded to all the backlash. It was extremely disappointing. It would have been like when the first Sonic movie came out, if they just said, oh, well, you don't know anything about Sonic, I actually programmed Sonic Riders in PS2, so I have a better vision of what this character is supposed to look like, and then just calling you a racist instead of actually addressing the complaints. Just a little bit ridiculous. But I'm going to be dropping another video as well, going into the new Avatar: The Last Airbender live adaptation, and it's going to be touching on how the original writers from the story left the production of the live action remake fairly early on in the process, and I think that played a larger role than most assume. But if you've made it this far into the video, I appreciate it. If you enjoy this style of content, leave a like, a comment, drop a subscribe, hit the bell. It lets me know that you guys enjoy this style of content and it helps it hit the algorithm a little bit better. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and I'll catch you later.